Hello, I'm Duncan Autry, and I'm the creator of the Omni-Win Project. And today I'm going to talk about how we can upgrade our democratic systems. Slight background, the goal of the Omni-Win Project is to help amplify the co-creation of a better democracy, one where people are included in the decisions that affect their lives. And I believe that there are already solutions to all of the issues that we have to overcome. And those, however, are not necessarily talking to each other, or they're not well known. And so my goal is to bring them to your awareness and spread the word and put them into conversation with each other. I've organized my thinking into 4 strategic themes. We need collaborative communication skills. We need to upgrade our democratic systems. We need to understand some of the frameworks and philosophical thinking that can help us change our culture. And we need to do some of the individual personal work in order to make this happen. So last week I talked about collaborative communication, and now I'm going to talk about how we can improve our democratic systems. It might not be a surprise to hear that democracy is struggling a little bit. It's struggling insofar as our representative democracy is not necessarily helping us make the best decisions, seems to be getting stuck. And around the world, there's a popular arc towards authoritarianism and other ways of making decisions. And that's probably not the best choice. Democracy is amazing. It's really great that we believe in our society and in many societies that the citizens, the population, or the people should have input into the decisions that are affecting their lives. They should be voting on who their leaders are. This is a breakthrough, amazing concept. Now, I'm going to give out a special shout out to the United States here. The United States has the longest running democracy in the world right now. It's been going for well over 200 years. It's not the oldest democracy. The first idea came from Greece, as many people have heard. Back at the beginning, only white people who owned land could vote. Women were able to vote in the United States in 1920, and people of all races in the United States were not able to participate in democracy until 1965. So it's a relatively new experiment that we're doing, but it's one that is growing. And there's something that's really important about how we're approaching this ideal of really trying to believe and live into the belief and the philosophy that people should have a choice and an impact in the decisions that affect their lives. But as I said at the top, it's struggling right now. It's not doing a very good job. So I'm going to start off with 2 critiques and then kind of break down those critiques and why they're challenging or why they are problematic. And then I'm going to talk to you about some of the cool ways that we can change this up. And there's some sort of high bar things and low bar and easy low hanging fruit. So let's see what that looks like. So the first critique I want to have is about voting. Now, again, voting is a breakthrough idea. It's such a cool idea for people to not have their ruler be ordained by God or something, but instead to have that be ordained by the people. And choosing who their leader is a great idea. But we're still not that far from just giving over all the power. I kind of like to think of voting as like the lowest form of democracy. It's just one vote, and then 4 years of being frustrated about what happens is not that much. Basically, the only ways if you want to have influence in the meantime is lobbying or sending letters or protest, various kinds of advocacy. So the problem with voting, I think, is twofold. But one is that it creates this win-lose situation where you can have 51% of the people want something, but then the other 49%, they just lost. They don't get anything that they want. That is a real miss, because guess what? Those 49% of the people are going to try to figure out how to be the 51% next time. And that just gets us in this cycle of rivalrous dynamics. That's something that I was talking about a couple weeks ago. The other challenge is it creates this all or nothing kind of situation. It's like you either get your person, or you get your law, or you get your piece of legislation passed or your policy passed, or you don't. And that kind of black, white, digital thinking, like digital as in like ones and zeros, it's not very effective. And it creates resentment. So that's creating all sorts of issues. Now, on one hand, we're voting for policies, and on the other hand, we're voting for representatives. So I'm going to talk a little bit about policy first, and then I'll talk about some of the challenges of representation as a form of democracy. That will be my second critique. So when we're voting from policy, there's a bunch of challenges that are happening here. First of all, we'll be taking pieces of legislation that we like bundling together. So people are just adding all sorts of stuff. I know some of the latest things that have passed through Congress in the United States are like hundreds and hundreds of pages long, all sorts of issues. They're not necessarily connected to other issues. I mean, just as an example, I think during one of the COVID response bills that happened, we added a piece of legislation in there that talked about declassifying UFOs in the United States. That has anything to do with COVID, but someone needed to add it in there because no one's ever going to get their thing passed. So policies, we're bundling them together. The other challenge that's happening is that these policies and pieces of legislation are being created in like a black box. There's not transparency about how this is happening. So there's just negotiation in private, in secret, and then it kind of comes out and you either can take it or leave it. That combination is really problematic because that means that by the time it gets to the citizen to vote on, but even the citizens aren't voting on that, representation coming soon. But even if the legislator is voting on it, people don't really even understand what's happening, and just having that up or down vote on an issue means that we're not actually able to engage in the nuance. And honestly, everything that we have to deal with in the world right now is complex and nuanced. I'll be talking a lot more about complexity in the next video next week. The other thing that's happening with this kind of up-down voting, our system is getting totally frozen right now in this moment in the United States. April 2022, the U.S. Senate has a 50-50 voting margin. That means that we're constantly getting stuck. Now, some people want to fix this by getting rid of the filibuster or making it so that people don't need to have a 60% majority. But honestly, we actually need to talk about the nuance and talk about all the details and find out why some people are into the idea and why they're not into the idea. Again, we'll talk about solutions in a moment. The other thing that I find really interesting, and I learned this through a video by Represent Us, it's represent.us, and they have this video, which I'll include in the notes here. This research that was done by Princeton University, and they asked, does the government actually represent the people's desires? They did a bunch of research, which can be mapped onto a graph. So you can imagine on this x-axis, we have over here, no one supports the idea, and over here, 100% of the population supports this idea. And then on this axis, we're thinking, how likely is this thing to pass? And we would think that if the voices of the people really mattered, then something that has 0% support would get 0% chance of passing, and something that has 100% everyone wants would get 100% likelihood of passing. And so we would get a line that kind of went like that. But guess what? They did their research, they crunched the numbers, and the line looks like this: 30% chance of passing. Everything that happens in Congress has a 30% chance of passing, regardless of whether or not people like it or not. And they even have this conclusion that the amount of impact that people's desires, citizens' desires, has on actual legislation is close to 0%, minuscule. It's near zero impact, statistically irrelevant. So that's our first clue that this up-down voting policy situation is not working right now. So what might be some of the other things that's impacting this? Well, the way we're doing our democracy right now is this representative system. So we vote for our person, and then they go represent us for a period of time. And this is, in a certain way, just kind of like a mega bundle. That person who we're voting for, they'll first of all come up with their policies, which again they're doing without much transparency, or how do they come up with their ideas. And then you get to vote for this person, and you're either voting for everything they like, and so that already creates a situation where we're like, what if I like some part of what this guy's saying? What I like this part of this guy is saying? That's not a possibility. But there's a lot more challenges about representative government that, like, other than just putting all this pressure on this one person to figure out all the answers to all the issues by themselves or in secret with other influence. So, some of the challenges of representative democracy and about why representatives will never represent us, some of this comes from the work of Manuel Arriaga, who wrote a book called Rebooting Democracy. And I'll put a link to this list. And he has 10 reasons why representatives won't represent us. But just to give you a taste of it, first of all, those people are self-selecting. They're people who want to be in power, and they usually have people who have a lot of money. They also are people who tend to be extroverted. So they have some sort of reason to be doing it. So they're not a good sample of our regular population. They're kind of special folks there. And then what's more is once they get into power, then they hang out with people who are also in power. And so they become more and more distant from like the person who they're absolutely representing, the person who's like way down on the ground floor, and they're isolated. They're in Washington, they're doing all these different things. And over time, they'll just get lost in the political process as opposed to thinking about what's going on, what people are actually needing. So also there's all sorts of messed up corrosive incentives there. They have incentive to want to stay in office. And so they're going to have an incentive to win and to do what's going to help them out more than maybe what's right. Now, maybe they do go into office with this real beautiful idea of being a public servant. And I'm sure that happens a lot. But there's all sorts of ways with like the parties and the way the elections work and the pressure of this is just the way we do things around here, or if they're new, needing to do what their leaders say, or they're not going to really have any influence. All of those things are having folks who are in office or representatives to be making compromises that has nothing to say still about just the corrupting influence of money. In the United States, we totally are able to have money in our politics, and people are able to give money to politicians and say what they want and have expectations that they're actually going to get what they want when they give them that money. And that's would be considered like serious corruption in a lot of countries, but in the United States, it's par for the course. In fact, we even have the Citizen United decision by the Supreme Court saying that corporations are citizens too. And anyways, money is influencing our politics a lot. It gets closer to there being like $1, one vote, as opposed to just one person, one vote. So it's undermining even our voting system, which is, again, minimal, but the best thing we have going for us. All of this kind of then gets us into the situation where we're looking to the lesser evil. Like, well, I don't trust that person, but I trust this person less. And that lesser evil or voting against people becomes this par for the course. And when we add this in with like the rivalrous dynamics and the idea that someone has to win because someone needs to lose, that feeds into polarization. It incentivizes everyone to be looking out for their own interests, because as soon as they, start listening to other folks, there's the perception they risk losing what it is they believe in. And just think about for a moment, like, what is the cost of everyone looking out for their unilateral self-interest, trying to get what they want? Well, honestly, that's about as anti-democratic as there could be. If we want to believe in all what the people want, then we have to really care about who all the people are and what do they want. And right now, it's more of an incentive to exclude the people who we don't like from the system, or to try to win against them or vote them down, than it is to actually try to figure out what do they actually want, what do they need. So, okay, maybe none of this is new to you. Hopefully that's a good summary of some of the challenges that we're facing in our current democratic system. Let's talk a little bit about what some of these solutions might be. There are a lot of really cool organizations and people and authors and actual experiences and experiments that are happening with creating deliberative democracy and citizen-based decision-making, where actual citizens, not elected officials, but actual citizens are participating in making the decisions that are affecting their lives. So I'm going to talk about this in a couple different layers. So one, I'm going to talk about deliberation. Like, what does it mean to have a deliberative process? The other one is sortition, or representative samples of populations. I'll talk about that, this idea of citizen assemblies. And then I'll talk a little bit about just like processes for better citizen engagement, which I think we could actually apply right now. We wouldn't have to really change our entire system. We just need to try to do it. So let's talk about deliberation. A deliberative process is one where, with a facilitator or with someone who has a process, you get a diverse group of people together to actually think through an issue. And the process oftentimes will take a diverse body, give them a bunch of information about the topic, get clear about what is the question we're actually trying to answer here, and does everyone agree that this is a worthwhile question to answer? And then people will talk about it and share their opinions and maybe influence each other. And out of that conversation will come up some questions. Wait a minute, I didn't know that that was true. Or is that true? Or, whoa, why? How does this work? Or what data do we have that this is possible? People might have questions. Then you bring in experts, and people can choose the experts. They come in and they will explain the questions that people have. And then people will talk about it more. And then they'll think about it a little more. And then they're going to come up with some more questions. And then they get more information. And then they get more questions. And then more information. And this process, when done with diverse groups of people, is super effective. I can think about various facilitation models that can do this. And the best example, one of them is like Mickey Cashton has a tool called convergent facilitation, but there are many, many models. And honestly, that's what I talked about in the video from last week about the tools that we have to have collaborative communication. So this process can get people to really come together and think about things and really think something through. Now, this could be applied to Congress itself, or it could be applied to city council, but it works really well with a group of citizens. There's all sorts of ways in bringing in the different stakeholders and people who have interests, even the corporations. They can even have a piece of this conversation. But it takes time. And I think that's an interesting piece. It seems like, whoa, we don't have time to actually think this issue all the way through. We're in a hurry. This is an urgent thing. And definitely there are some urgent things that need to be made decisions about. But thinking about some of the huge issues that we're trying to deal with, whether it's like policing or guns or climate or election laws or various issues, let's say if we could have a 2-year-long deliberative conversation about it, maybe even a 4-year-long deliberative conversation about it, but in the end, we came up with something that people were really on board with, that would be worth it. Because otherwise, we've been spending the last 2, 3, 4 decades still debating these things, and we will continue debating them if we keep on trying to find quick answers. The Green Berets have a motto: fast is slow and smooth is fast. And I think that applies here. If we try to get our solutions quickly and just get it done now, then we actually will slow ourselves down by moving too quickly, because we're going to have to revisit this next year and next year and next year and next year, and we won't actually deal with the issue. But smooth is fast, or let's just say deliberative is fast. if we really think it all the way through, we can really come up with some really good ideas. So that's the idea of deliberation. And there's something powerful about having like a sustainable outcome, like an outcome that people are on board with and really has the possibility of working for a long time. And if we have a deliberative process, then when new questions come up, then we can deliberate about it a little more, because that's how life is. It's going to keep on going, everyone. So who are these people? This is where the idea of sortition comes in. We have well over 300 million people in the United States. Majority of them are adults. That's a lot of people to have in one conversation. Even just in a city of hundreds of thousands of folks, that's a lot of people to include in the conversation. So one of the ideas that people have discovered is the idea of sortition. You can think about this as a lottery, or this is the same process that we use to select juries. People get an invitation. It's a random sampling of the population. They come in, and that random sampling gets the whole picture. So we have the people who really care about the issue on this side, and people who really care about the issue on this side. And then we have the people who don't really even know what we're talking about. All of those people need to be part of the conversation because they're all going to be impacted by it. And by just having regular people, not professionals, not experts, not lobbyists, not advocates, just regular people have a conversation about an issue. And if you have like 15 to 20, 25 folks, you can get a pretty good sampling of the population. You then can have that group go through that deliberative, transparent process to make decisions. Now, there's some various critiques of this idea. And one that you might be thinking of is, hold on, just regular old person is going to be making decisions for us. They're not that smart, not that educated. They probably don't even know how we're going to be. We don't know what they're talking about in the conversation. There's a lot of evidence that has learned that this process really works. One, because the group intelligence tends to be far superior to any individual's intelligence. And there's also lots of evidence that people are also able to change their minds. Even if they come in super intensely in a position, they're able to actually learn and make decisions and change their ideas. There's a book by Trammell Crow and Bill Shireman called In This Together. It's how Republicans, Democrats, capitalists, and activists are uniting to tackle climate change and more. Now, this book is specifically talking about how all these different groups need to come together to think about climate change and the environment, but it applies to most of our political issues. And they have this little piece in here where they're talking about how 70% of the population tends to be more interested in solving problems than whatever their position is. And 30% of the population cares more about their position than actually solving the issue. And so in this kind of process with this random sampling, we actually can have the conversation where the majority of the people who are actually trying to solve the issue. And just add to this that this is part of the illusion and polarization. The voices that are staunchly believing in one side or the other side, they tend to be the ones that get the most voice. Our media definitely found the benefit of that. The best clickbait on the internet is about polarizing topics. They get a lot of airtime, but actually, most people want to figure things out. And we can give them information, they can learn, and they can make decisions. So sortition-based thinking is a great idea. This process is called a citizen assembly. And I'll put some links for different kinds of citizen assembly processes and groups. It's being used in Oregon, it's happened in Iceland, France, and various places. Check out citizen assemblies. One very specifically interesting one that I recommend checking out is an organization called Of by For, and I'll put the link for that down here as well. Okay, that sounds like a lot. I'm not sure if we're ready to replace our representative government with just a government run by citizens. I can understand your concerns. That's okay. We can take even smaller steps. We can actually start doing real, authentic citizen engagement right now using the system that we have. This could be something that's led by politicians, And we can actually start to demand that you need to actually engage with the people who are impacted by something before you go making decisions. Now, one of the problems with our current citizen engagement, this is something that I've observed in my local city council here in Oakland. Most people come to get involved in the process or share their opinion when that bundle of legislation is about to be voted on. And people come and say, I don't like this, I like this. By the time that something gets all the way to that piece of decision making where a legislator or elected representative is voting on something, that decision's already been made. So we actually need to go way upstream. And this is where the citizen engagement, I think, can be really powerful. Instead of thinking about democracy as a yes, no, win, lose, up, down voting situation, what if we thought about this as a consensus building effort? What if our representatives were looking at their diverse population that they represent, their constituents, and they say, wow, I want to find something that everyone here can get on board with. Let's try to figure out how we can do consensus. Again, we have the tools for that. I'll be talking about that more. So they could use sortition or do it a citizen assembly. They can create a deliberative process, but at the bare minimum, there's a couple other things that are possible. One of them is there's some really cool consensus building digital platforms out there. And these are digital tools where tens of thousands of people can participate in a certain situation, and they can, like look at, just as an example, like, what are we going to do about this park? We have funding for the park. Do people want to have more tennis courts, or do they want to have more a dog park, or do they want to have a playground? How do we spend the money? Is safety more important in beauty, or all these different things? We want to see public art. All those questions are those kinds of things that, instead of, again, bundling it into some piece of legislation, you can give people a chance to go and, like, there's a little slider of like, I value this, and they can even see, like, I would allocate this much money here, and then they realize if they allocate it all there, then they don't get to allocate it to something else. There's really cool digital tools that acting representatives and politicians can use right now to gather the opinion of their people as they're trying to figure out, what should we do about this? And that's a far cry from just putting it to a vote, been bundling it all up into one thing and then asking people to say yes or no. Another thing that could be used in our process, and this idea comes from a friend and colleague and former podcast guest of mine, Manuel Herrera, and he talks about this idea of creating like a stakeholder impact statement. And so the idea would be, if you're bringing a piece of legislation, we would like you to know, first of all, what's the problem you're trying to solve? Second of all, who are the stakeholders? Who is going to be impacted by this? And then a statement about who's in favor of this. Why are they in favor of this? Why do they like it? And then, this is the important part, who's not in favor of this? Why are they not in favor of this? What did they say? How have you taken their ideas into consideration? Did you give them a chance to talk to each other? Would you be willing to share some of their words? I mean, imagine if someone was bringing a new law that they have or something, and they were able to say, I've spoken with everyone who's impacted by this. These are the different opinions. And instead of just trying to say, this is why it's the best idea, they were like, actually, here's the reason why people don't like this, and here's the ways I've addressed some of those concerns. That level of thoughtfulness, or to know that, wow, you actually really did talk to all the different people, that's amazing. That kind of thinking, just taking into account who are the people and including them before the legislation gets made, could be a super powerful thing. So in all of this, some of the values that sort of start coming forward here. These are some of the values of open democracy, which is coming from this book here, Open Democracy by Helene Landemore. It's called Reinventing Popular Rule for the 21st Century. And I'm going to include link to this book, but also a really great podcast interview where she talks with Ezra Klein about this idea. This idea of open democracy, that people should be involved in the decisions that are impacting their lives, there's like some really important values that are in that. Those are values of inclusion. We need to make sure that we're including everyone, not just the people who agree with us. There's something about equality and equality of voice and equality of votes and equality, like no one is better or worse than anyone. The idea of making sure that there's a facilitated process, that people have a right to be able to participate in these kinds of decisions, and transparency. These are the kind of values that we need to see in our democracy, and that's kind of the essence of what the Omni-Win Project's about. We don't know if this is going to work. We don't really know if we can actually make our democracy into one where citizens are participating in things and everything's slowed down enough to be able to make sure it's deliberative, or whether or not people will trust what the representative sample of the population is saying, or people even want to participate further upstream in this thing. But I want to point out that we have a choice right now. As you said at the very top, democracy is struggling. It's not working out very well. People don't trust it. They don't trust that their representatives are representing them. They're disapproving of the different things that are happening. We know that polarization is freezing up our system. And as far as I can tell, when it comes to like the really important long-term issues, we are not having good conversations about it. Where the representative democracy two-party system is really crunking us up. So what can we do about that? We can go two directions here. We can go down this path of trying to figure out what actually matters to the people who are impacted by this, and let's value that. It'll be slightly less efficient, but way more sustainable and effective, and really takes advantage of the value of multiple perspectives looking at any given issue. The other direction we can go, and this is a very popular choice, is authoritarianism. We can go down the direction of some leader telling us what the answer is, forget what people say, we don't have time for that, and we can make fast decisions, and potentially there's a benevolent dictator there that want to work things out for us. Who knows if that's going to work out? We either go towards more democracy or towards less democracy. And I'm not really into binaries. I'm a fan of the both and. But I think there's a real choice here. And this is the kind of stuff I would love to promote with the Omni-Win Project. And just to give you a sense of the arc of where all this is going, next week I'm going to be talking about some of the frameworks, philosophical frameworks, cultural trajectories, and the folks who are thinking about like how to even think about this, how to even understand what is going on. So some of that cultural philosophical stuff will be coming next week. And then the week after that, I'm going to be talking about the whole strategic theme of how do we prepare ourselves as individuals to open up to listening to other people. And then with these videos, I'm going to start breaking down all of these little pieces a little bit more. So get into the citizen assemblies, we can get into the corruption and the facilitation and the complexity and stakeholder impact statements and all these things. I'll start breaking those down in much shorter videos coming forward. And then I'm launching a new podcast. It's coming soon, I promise. And this podcast is going to be called the Omni-Win Project. I'm going to be talking to the experts in these different fields. I'm going to be inviting all these folks that I just mentioned to come have a conversation about how we can move things forward. And this first season, I'm going to just give them a chance. Just tell us what they got going on and unpack some of their ideas and see what else they think we should be thinking about. So this summer, new podcast coming soon. If you want to stay tuned for all of this, follow the YouTube channel or follow me on omniwin.substack.com. I'm excited to be in this journey with you. Have a great day.